I was out recently flying my drone and somebody asked me a question that many drone pilots will have heard before. What are you filming? Now, that's a perfectly reasonable question, but it was followed straight away by another one. You're not filming my house, are you? Over the years that I've been flying drones, I've noticed a pattern. Many people, they seem to assume that if a drone is up in the sky, it must be spying on somebody. It might be spying on them, on their house, their family, their dug. But in most cases, the drone pilot is probably filming a landscape or a coastline or a castle, a harbour, a sunset, or something else which has nothing to do with the Karen that's approached you. So why is it that so many people assume that they're the centre of attention? Now, I've said this before. There are circumstances where filming people or private property can create legal problems. There are also circumstances where it doesn't. I've covered those issues in other videos, and if you want to watch one of those, you can click up here and there'll be a video there for you to watch where I address that. But what really interests me is something else. Why do people believe what they believe? Why does a drone create suspicion when many other cameras just don't? Think about it. Many of us have got cameras mounted on our homes, ring-type doorbell cameras, CCTV systems, dash cams, security cameras. We're recorded when we visit shops or we visit petrol stations. We're even recorded when we withdraw cash from cash machines. We're recorded every time we go into a town centre. We're recorded almost everywhere. But as soon as a drone appears in the sky, some people lose their minds. Why? Why? Right, I think I've got some of the answer. And some of it is simple. Most people have never flown a drone, right? They don't know what the camera can actually see. If you've never flown one, it's easy to imagine that the camera is far more powerful than it really is. Some people seem to believe that a drone can hover hundreds of metres away and somehow see through their windows, read documents on their kitchen table and identify what colour of knickers their wife is wearing. But the reality is far less exciting than that. Drone cameras use relatively wide-angle lenses. The footage often captures huge areas of the landscape. The thing that the pilot is interested in might be only a tiny part of what's in the frame. The pilot might not even be aware that the Karen's house is visible at all. So maybe it's not really about the camera. Maybe it's about the drone. Because a CCTV camera sits on a wall, a ring doorbell sits beside or on a front door. People know where they are. People know where they're pointing and they know what they're doing. But a drone moves. It appears unexpectedly. It changes position. It hovers. It looks almost alive. And I wonder whether people instinctively treat a drone differently because of that. A fixed camera feels passive. A drone feels active, even when the actual camera is doing exactly the same thing. Then there's also the influence of the media. Let's be honest, how often do you see a news story about somebody responsibly filming a beautiful landscape with a drone? Not very often. But if a drone flies near an airport, it's national news. If a drone causes a problem, it's national news. So the public's perception becomes shaped by the stories that they hear. And those stories are often negative. So over time, people start associating drones with problems rather than any type of positivity or even a sense of mind your own business. I also think there's another factor. You'll have heard, I imagine, of main character syndrome. I won't explain what that is at the moment. If you haven't heard of what that is, look it up. Google it. I think people have a natural tendency to think of themselves as more important in the worldview than they actually are. Now, a drone is fairly unusual. Most people don't see a drone in the sky every day. So when one appears nearby, it's easy to assume that it has arrived for a reason. And that reason must somehow involve me, because I am the centre of the universe. And maybe not thinking they're the centre of the universe, but they think they're more important to everybody in the world than they actually are. And the reality is usually much less dramatic than that. The drone pilot's often interested in the landscape, the architecture, the coastline, the weather, even the scenery at a location that they're flying at. The person standing in the garden is often completely irrelevant to the flight. Now, none of this means that people are wrong to care about their privacy. Privacy matters to all of us, of course it does. But I do think there's a gap between what many people believe drone cameras can do and what they can actually do. And maybe that gap is responsible for many of the misunderstandings that drone pilots often encounter when people confront us. So what can we do about it? If many of these concerns come from a misunderstanding about what the drone can actually do, the obvious question is, what can we as drone pilots do to alleviate that? Now, I don't think it's realistic to expect every member of the public to become an expert in drone technology. And most people just aren't interested enough, to be honest with you. And that's fair enough. But I do think there are things that we can do that reduce the chances of a confrontation happening in the first place. The first thing is understanding that when somebody approaches you, they're probably not looking for an argument. They're probably looking for a bit of reassurance. They've seen something unfamiliar and they don't understand it. And they're trying to figure out whether they should be concerned about this. Now, that's a very different situation for somebody who's walking up deliberately looking for a fight. I've found personally that many confrontations can be diffused very quickly with a simple explanation. Hello there, I'm just filming the coastline. I'm just filming this castle here. I'm taking a wee drone flight around about the harbour and having a look at it. Sometimes I'll even show them the screen. And once people realise that their house isn't the focus of the flight and that they are not the centre of attention, many concerns disappear almost instantly. Now, does that work every time? No. There'll always be some people who have already made up their minds. But in my experience, most people are simply curious. The next question is a tricky one. It's mentioned somewhere in the CAA guide, I remember seeing it once, about considering whether we should tell people in advance that we're going to fly. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a great idea. After all, if people are worried about the unknown, surely giving them advance notice helps. Sometimes it does, but not always. Imagine you're sitting in a park enjoying your afternoon and somebody walks up to you and says, just to let you know, I'm about to launch a camera-equipped aircraft and fly it around this area. You probably weren't thinking about drones before, but you are now. In some cases, you've actually created concern where none existed before. And this is where context becomes important. There are situations where speaking to people beforehand makes perfect sense, and there are situations where it achieves nothing useful. In fact, it can sometimes make things worse. You know where I'm going with this, don't you? There are content creators online whose entire business model revolves around conflict. They approach people, they make announcements, they inform people what they're about to do and there's nothing you can do about it. And then they sit back and they wait for the argument to start. Their goal isn't reassurance, their goal is confrontation, right? The argument becomes the content, the disagreement becomes the entertainment. I think that's completely different from what most responsible drone pilots are trying to achieve. Most of us aren't looking for a confrontation. Most of us just want to fly our drones, get the footage and go home. So, if you're ever approached by someone who has a negative attitude, don't make your goal, how do I win this argument here? Maybe think about it like, how do I avoid this argument altogether? Because once tempers rise, nobody wins. Sometimes a friendly explanation helps. Sometimes showing the screen helps. Sometimes simply being approachable helps. And sometimes the best thing you can do is choose your flying location carefully and avoid creating unnecessary concern in the first place. Now, none of this guarantees that you'll never be challenged. If you fly drones long enough, somebody will eventually approach you. It's inevitable. But maybe the real lesson is this. Most people are not anti-drone. Most people are not anti-drone pilot. Most people are simply reacting to something they don't fully understand. And when people don't understand something, they often fill in the blanks themselves. The problem is that the blanks are not always filled with facts. They're often filled with assumptions. And maybe that's the biggest challenge facing us drone pilots today. Not the technology or the regulations, but the gap between what drones actually do and what many people think they do. I'd be interested to hear what you've got to say about this. If you're a drone pilot, have you ever been accused of spying on anyone? What do you think causes that reaction? And if you're not a drone pilot, what is it about drones that makes some people uncomfortable when they don't feel the same way about other cameras? Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear what you think.